So in this tutorial, I'll show you how to add a socket to a character so you can hold a weapon. And if you want to stick around a little bit at the end, I'll show you how you can make it. So see how this sword is on his back, and then you press C and then it's in the hand. You press C again, it's on the back. If you want to stick around, that's a little bit extra. But the main part of this tutorial is showing you how to add the socket to the character so they can actually hold the weapon. Let's go. So I have this really basic sword. A couple of the important things to note when you're creating weapons is translation. So you see X forward, Y right, minus Y left. Just try and keep that in mind. It's not super important, but try and keep everything that you design in Blender, try and keep the X is always forward, or you might like to have Y as always forward, but just try and keep it always the same when you're making something in Blender. If you don't understand what that means just yet, if you're a beginner, you'll get to learn this sort of stuff, but you will understand it at some point. Another thing that's really important when it comes to weapons is the pivot point. So at the moment on this sword, the pivot point is this dot here, but you want your pivot point to be the grip of the weapon. So the pivot point is the calculation it's made. It is the point where it will connect to the bone that we're going to make. So we're going to have the pivot point as there, which is fine, because when I export this, it will default the pivot point to the center of Blender, which is 0, 0, 0. See this point here up there, minus 0.02. If I put this to 0, that point on my sword will go into that circle. See, so now the pivot point's there, but we want the pivot point to sort of be in the middle of that sword, so we're going to put it down a bit. Another thing that I had a massive problem with when I was making stuff in Blender and importing into Unreal Engine, and that was the normals. So the problem I was having is I was importing stuff into Unreal Engine and it was invisible in Unreal Engine. I was importing from Blender into Unreal Engine, and when I imported it in, the thing that I'd made would be invisible, and that was because my normals were inside out. So to check it that your normals are all facing outwards, come up here and on there, face orientation, and it should be blue. You want it all to be blue. So see, it's all blue, right? So let me just show you for an example what it would look like if it was wrong. Select everything, Shift N, recalculate normals inside, and then go to face orientation. Everything's red. If I imported this sword into Unreal Engine now, when everything is red, it wouldn't show. So what we need to do, if you have something and it's all red like this, what you need to do, go to edit mode, highlight everything with A, and then Shift N, and then that should just do the job. Now when I go back to face orientation, everything's blue, so that's fine. That will show in Unreal Engine. So like I say, if you're having a problem where your stuff isn't showing in Unreal Engine, it's because your normals are inside out. Yeah, we want the pivot point to be this middle bit of the grip. So what we're going to do, just go up to Export, FBX, and then find a place in your folders where you can put it. I'm going to call this swords with a Z, and then click selected objects, because see, it's selected, the orange thing. I only want to export the selected things. You might have other stuff in your scene. You only want to export the thing that you want to export, so that you've highlighted. Selected objects. You can change like geometries, normals only, edge, face. We're just going to keep it as normals only for now. Export FBX. Now I'm in Unreal Engine 5.7 and I'm in a third person template. I'm going to go down to content drawer. I've already made a folder called weapons. So if you want to make a folder, go to content, right click, new folder. But I've already made one called weapons. I'm going to open, double click on that, and then click on this import, and then find where you saved your thing, open, and you'll get this menu will come up. Can just use pipeline defaults, because in the new Unreal Engine, this comes up a lot, and I noticed if you just use pipeline defaults, it imports properly. So Yeah, I was having some importing issues before, but it's settled down a bit now. But yeah, so yeah, use Polyline default. It's just a static mesh basically that you're importing. On this bit, materials, import materials. Once you've got your materials all sorted and you know what you're doing with materials, sometimes you might just import static meshes without materials, so you can just click that off. But we're just going to bring the materials in, import. So it's brought in the sword and the two materials that were on it. I don't like these materials, but just for the sake of the tutorial, we're just going to leave it with the materials that it's brought in. But if I was doing this properly, I would have like materials for metal and for the black part of the sword and stuff, and then I would apply it. So like if I click on this static mesh now, double click, and then I would apply my two new materials to it that I'd made in Unreal Engine. So we've imported the sword. What we need to do now is we need to add the bone to our character that can hold the sword. So what you want to do is go to your content browser, go to third person, go to blueprints, and then go third person character. And this is the character that you've got, right? But what we need to do is we need to add new sockets to the skeletal mesh of this character. You might have your own character, so you might want to add it to the skeletal mesh of that. But we're going to add the sockets to this character. So what we want to do is we want to click on the mesh over here and see how it's skeletal mesh asset, right? If we click on here, it will take us to this bit folder with the magnifying glass. It will take us to where that skeletal mesh is in our content browser. So if we click that, see it's coming up there. So right, double click on this one. And then we've got this mesh, right? So what we're going to do is we want to add the swords to this hand, the right hand. So we can scroll down. Hand L, we want the hand R, not hand L. You can put it on the left hand if you want. So go to hand R. See, and that's the bone for this character for hand R. You've got hand grip. It looks like there's already sockets pre-made in this, but we're going to add our of one, right? So click on hand R there, and then we're going to go add socket, and we're just going to call this. See, now it's made this new socket, hand R socket. I like to call this like weapon hand R or something like that. So you can see socket name, you can just call it weapon hand. And then on this bit where it's blue, right click and then add preview asset, and then type in the asset that you made. So we made the swords. So see now the sword is previewing in that socket. So it's remember when I said about where we made the pivot point on the sword? It's literally attached the sword to the pivot point of that hand. See? Right, but we don't want it there. So go back to the weapon hand that you made, and you can actually just move it around. So click on W to make it so it's the arrows, and then you just move it to wherever you think it looks best. That'll do for now, but that's the basic thing. What we're going to do is we're going to add a sword to the back as well, so you can carry a sword on the back. So it will be around about by the spine. Let's go spine 5. So basically, whenever the spine moves, the sword on the back is going to move. So we're going to add a socket again. Right click, add socket, and we can just call this. So you can F2 to rename stuff as well. We just call this back socket, right? And then do the same. Go right click, add preview asset, sword. See, and now the sword has come attached to the back socket. Drag that back. See, the good thing about making sockets is you can move them around and it's not affecting the bone above it. So if I was to add the sword to this spine and try and adjust the spine socket, you're going to screw all your skeleton up. But adding a socket is not affecting the skeleton at all. So you can actually move them around, you can rotate them. So let's just, I mean, you can move it how you want, and the controls are the same. It's like W for move, E for rotate, R for scale, but you don't really want to scale sockets and stuff. You might find that when you import your weapon, the weapon is absolutely massive, and it's because the scales are all out of whack. So if that's the case, right, what you want to do is you want to go back up to your socket. Say if I made the preview and the sword was massive or the sword was too small, you can actually scale the socket. So see this socket, I've clicked on it, and the relative scale is 1.1, 1.0. If I made this 2, 2, 2, the sword would be 2 times the size. It wouldn't affect any of the bones or anything. It would just affect whatever's attached to it. So you might find that your sword is, or whatever weapon you're attaching, is massive. What you need to do is come to the relative scale and go 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, and it will scale. But that's to do with the scale of the skeleton and everything. So yeah, if it's big or small, just go to the socket on its own. Don't adjust any of the spines. Go to the socket you just made and adjust the scale in there. So right, so now we've got the sword on the back and the sword in the hand, and then just click save. Now when we go to our character, it doesn't have that thing. It doesn't have them things because they're just previews on the skeletal mesh. They're not in the game or anything. You haven't added these to the games, but you have added the sockets to the character. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the third person character and then highlight mesh so it's blue, and then go add, and then go static mesh. And then on the static mesh, come over to where it says static mesh on the right hand side, and then type in your sword. Right, now the sword is on the floor because it's not attached to any sockets or anything. But see on here where it says parent socket, we can click on the one that we just made. So click on this magnifying glass and the list of the sockets will be on there. Remember, we called it weapon hand. So now it's in the exact place where we put it before. Right, so if we compile and save, our character will have that sword now. She's got the sword in her hand, and that's pretty much a very simple way of adding a weapon to a hand. When you actually get, like, this is just a beginner's way of doing it. When you actually get to doing all the coding properly and stuff, and you're picking weapons up and dropping weapons, you don't really put a static mesh in here like this. You would attach, through code, you would attach a weapon to a parent socket through blueprints and stuff as you're picking weapons up and stuff. But for now, we're just adding a basic sword to the character. So what you can do is on static mesh here, just Control C, Control V to duplicate it. So now basically he's got two, there's a sword there and you've got a sword there, right? On this sword, we're going to go back socket. So now he's got a sword in the hand and a sword on his back. See? Right? But obviously you don't want to have a sword on your hand and a sword on your back. So if you want to stick around, I'll show you how to make it so you can, it looks like you're taking it from your, you know, one appears in your hand and it disappears from your back. And then what you would do is you would make an animation where it would take the sword like this. So basically, we're not going to make a new input or nothing. We're just going to test. So on the third person character, on your viewport, go to event graph, and you see these are like jump and move and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put debug key, and then we're just going to use, let's just use debug key C for now. Right, this is just for testing purposes. See, static mesh, the top one was the sword in the hand. So you can go to static mesh, F2 to rename, and just put hand sword. And the static mesh one was the one in the back, F2, back sword. Right. Now what we're going to do is, in the event graph, when we press it, we're going to have the sword in our hand and not in our back. The hand sword one, we're going to come over to this, click on the hand sword, come over to here and type hidden in game. And then you'll see rendering hidden in game. We're going to tick this as true. So as default, we won't have one in our hand and we'll have one on our back. So if we just press play, see, there's not one in our hand, it's on our back. Right, because as default, it's not there. And then when we press the debug key, we're going to get the hand sword. We're going to bring that in. And we're going to put set hidden in game. And we're going to make it untrue. So now it is not hidden in game, basically. But what we need to do is we need to make the back sword so it is hidden. So we take the back sword one. And you can get that set hidden in game, Control V. And now you're ticking it so the back sword is hidden. But what we want to do is we want to make it so when we press C, you've got it in your hand and not on your back. And then when you press C again, it's not in your hand and it's on your back. So copy and paste this, Control V, Control C, Control V. Make a little space there. And then right click here and type flip flop. So when you press it, the hand sword is going to be shown in game, not hidden basically, and the back sword is going to be hidden. When you press it again, the hand sword is going to be hidden and the back sword is going to be unhidden. Now he's got it in the hand. Press C, back in his back, not in his hand. Press C, in his hand, not in his back. And basically, by like using like, you could maybe even use delays or animation timelines and stuff like that. You could put like a tiny delay for when he grabs it, but you'd use animation blueprints to make it so the character reaches back and stuff like that. So yeah, that's pretty much how to make a socket in a game and how to attach that socket to the hand. So basically what we learned, it was how to import a weapon into Unreal Engine. We learned how to add the socket to the character, and we learned a tiny little bit of code about setting something hidden in game and setting something to not be hidden in game. Yeah, so that's basically it. It's quite a simple thing to do, but when you start learning more, some of this stuff will be second nature, and it will be it can be really overwhelming when you're learning stuff to start with, especially like with sockets and yeah, it can be all quite overwhelming, but you'll start getting used to it and stuff. So yeah, that's how to add socket to a character so they can hold a weapon. And like I say, that's a very, very simple way of doing it. But even as that simple way, you will still need to create hand sockets and back sockets and stuff like that. Either way, even if you're going to add the static mesh into the player, or if you're going to have them picking up weapons, you still need these sockets, because these sockets are useful anyway. So when you're doing like Niagara effects and stuff, you can attach stuff to sockets. You could attach collision boxes to sockets, so you could have like damage on the head or damage in the chest being different and stuff. So yeah, the sockets are super useful when you're making games, and pretty much necessary. But yeah, thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.